Good evening. After all, COVID-19 has enlightened 7.5 billion humans. So we are not the same like last year. So we have changed for good. Today we are more conscious about our actions and about our environment, about our ecology, other forms of life. That is a good improvement for humans. So that is why I call it is a time of enlightenment. It's a birth of new consciousness. And today 7.5 billion people are talking about adaptation. How to adapt to the present condition and present situation. So we need to teach our children to adapt to the things what right now going on. It's a very, very important component of life, adaptation. Actually, United Nations talks about it in the fifth assessment, that is IPCC, fifth assessment. They are talking about adaptation for South Asia, that is for India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc., etc. The IPCC definition of adaptation, I want to read it for you. Here is the definition of IPCC. The process of adjustment to actual or expected climate and its effects. Again, I want to read the quote for you. Adaptation is the process of adjustment to actual or expected climate and its effects. So COVID-19, it's an effect. So it poses a limiting factor. That means a kind of obstacle for normal life. So we are talking about limiting factors. So we are facing so many limiting factors, one after another. So we need to unleash the power of adaptation. When there are limiting factors, only two options: you succumb to the situation or to rise up. So the best word I want to use here is conservation. That is the best strategy we need to follow under the category of adaptation. The best form of adaptation is conservation, preserving, respecting what we have. I want to give you some examples of conserving, to preserve wetlands, to save soil, water, air, to reduce energy consumption, to preserve mountains, forests, and rivers, to save plants and animals, to save all life on earth, to respect to the living and the non-living. And understanding the concept of Sarvodaya, that is the Indian word, to talk about the cosmic democracy. That means everything should flourish, the living and the non-living. So that is the thing which makes us to look deep into conserving, what to conserve, how to teach our children to conserve. So anyway, the new definition of life should be adaptation first. Usually life is defined by consumption, reproduction, and adaptation. But here, for the new generations, for our children and for our children's children and their great grandchildren, we need to teach life is defined by adaptation first, and then consumption, reproduction, etc., etc. In adaptation, there are two kinds of adaptation. One is physical adaptation. The second one is the behavioral adaptation. Physical adaptation is, examples are no food, no water, extinction of species, overpopulation, global warming, climate change, desertification, crowding, competition, disease, famine, food, water shortage. All these things are known as the physical limiting factors. Where there are limiting factors, there we need to unleash the power of adaptation. So this is a physical adaptation, because what I just mentioned, they are physical limiting factors. No food, no water, global warming, climate change, physical limiting factors. They pose an obstacle for all life on earth. They pose a threat to life on earth. So now we need to adapt. The second is behavioral adaptation. What is it? You see, how we behave, we have limiting factors in our own heart and mind and soul. We have greed, we have got violence, we have got hate, we have got jealousy, we have got prejudices. All these things are behavioral limiting factors. They pose threat. What you have inside, you expose outside. All things come from within you to outside. So now we need to adapt. The behavioral adaptation can be empathy, forgiveness, compassion, sacrifice, sharing, responsibility, faithfulness, accountability, etc., etc. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis is talking about it, about the behavioral adaptation. It's very interesting to see in Laudato Si what he is writing. He talks about how human behavior is all the way corrupt. Humans lost their own values and morals, and humans, they misplaced ethics, etc., etc. In the paragraph number 105, Pope Francis writes as follows: contemporary man has not been trained to use power well, because our technological development has not been accompanied by a development in human responsibility, values, and conscience. We cannot claim to have a sound ethics, a culture and spirituality genuinely capable of setting limits and teaching clear-minded self-restraint. Those are very strong words, isn't it? The modern man has lost his compass, his own direction, in other words. So behavioral adaptation is very important before we talk about the physical adaptation. The IPCC fifth assessment report in 2014, there is a document they prepared under the heading called "What is it for South Asia? What's in it for South Asia?" That is India, Sri Lanka, etc., etc. So they summarize the limiting factors. United Nations, IPCC, they spend so much money, so many thousands of scientists involved in this research, and they have given a very, very concluding report. Very nice, and it's very alarming, it's very uh, threatening. I want to give you the summary of it. IPCC is stating that further warming will continue, likely to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius and even likely to exceed 2 degrees Celsius by the turn of the century. The global water cycle will change, with the heat extending to the deep ocean, affecting circulation patterns. Decreases in Arctic ice cover and global glacial volume. Global mean sea level will continue to rise. Increase in the rate of carbon dioxide production, acidification of the oceans. Climate change will continue even if carbon dioxide 2 emissions are stopped. But right now, for the past 1 or 2 months, because of COVID-19 outbreak, CO2 emissions are reduced. But global warming is not reduced. It's going to continue. We can't really control it. So these are the limiting factors we are going to face. We are facing right now, and we are going to face very intensively in the future. And they are giving 9 boxes, the 9 alarming events that will happen in the future. These are all limiting factors again. The number 1, IPCC 5th assessment report defines that only one cause for the global warming, climate change, for all the extinctions, human activity. Number 2, climate change poses risk to loss of ecosystem services. Oh my God. Free ecosystem services we switched off. Human activity switches off. We don't want natural services because we can provide through science and technology. That is stupidity. We need to restore ecosystem services. Box 3, what are the IPCC scenarios? There will be increase of 2 degrees Celsius by 2100. That is not easy. It's terrible, 2 degrees Celsius. We are talking about another mass extinction. Box number 4, impacts of global warming will be sea level rise, loss of water resources, etc., etc. The box number 5, climate change will impact on food production and rainfall patterns. Box 6, heat-related mortality, psychological and emotional distress, malnutrition, domestic violence, etc., etc. Box 7, business as usual development pathways can contribute to climate risk and vulnerability. In other words, after this COVID-19 outbreak, if you are doing the same thing what you have been doing before the outbreak, I think that is called the business as usual activity. I think there is no salvation there, only further destruction. So we need to abandon business as usual models, and then we need to really come to sustainable development model. Box number 8, low regret adaptation will be regretting very low if you do organic farming, water harvesting, building social protection systems, social services and safety nets. The last box is number 9, talks about adaptation. The IPCC highlights many of the substantial development benefits that low carbon development can achieve. Sustainable development requires robust institutions and decision-making processes. So to conclude, adaptation is the best solution for the COVID-19 outbreak. The adaptation always should lead to conservation, as I told you earlier in the talk. And IPCC is stating that adaptation will bring immediate benefits and reduce the impacts of climate change in South Asia. Adaptation is fundamentally about risk management. Managing the limiting factors. Risk. COVID-19 is one of the risks. So adaptation is about managing COVID-19 outbreak. South Asia has many adaptation options. That is, people of Southeast Asia, they have wisdom, they've got experience. Their ancestors were not fools. Their ancestors were wise. They had traditional way of life. At the same time, they had advantage of science and technology. They can master both to produce positive results of sustainable development. So these are the recommendations come from IPCC, Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, 5th Assessment Report. Thank you.